All right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I am getting us started with our live event on Business Code of Ethics. I am going to introduce you to Melanie Wakefield and Gabrielle Torres, who are two of our HR coaches here. I'm going to turn it over to Melanie and let her tell you more about this and about Gabrielle. I do want to remind everybody that if you have any questions throughout the event, please add those to the Q&A so that we can better keep up with those. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Penny. Welcome to the Business Code of Ethics presentation this morning. I will be monitoring questions as they come through. Please make sure that you ask your questions in the Q&A section and not the chat. We will discuss the questions at the end of the webinar. And right now, I'd like to introduce Gabrielle Torres, who will be walking us through the webinar today. And I will go ahead and have you get started. Gabby, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about something foundational to both everyday business and long-term success, Business Code of Ethics. So before we dive in, I want you guys to kind of think about a company that you admire. Maybe it's your go-to clothing store or the reason you won't get generic. And then think about one that you don't, maybe one you avoid completely, or maybe your team iPhone or team Android. Chances are your opinion has something to do with how they ethically appear, and that's because of the power of a strong or weak code of ethics. So of course, this is just a standard note, but worth emphasizing, ethics are closely tied to law, but this presentation isn't legal advice, so always consult a lawyer for formal legal interpretation. So what is a business code of ethics? Think of it like a company's constitution. It doesn't change every quarter or fiscal year. It's a long-term guide that helps employees make consistent decisions, even when leadership isn't in the room. So for example, if someone in marketing is unsure whether a claim is misleading, a solid ethics code gives them that framework to kind of stop and evaluate it through a values lens. So it's a formal guide rooted in your company's core values. It outlines expected behavior from top leadership all the way to your interns. It shapes how people act, how decisions are made, and ultimately it's how trust is built, both internally and externally. So there's typically three types: compliance-based, all about following the rules. Think financial institutions, they're heavily regulated. Or value-based, they're about aligning with your mission and culture. Patagonia is a great example. They center every business decision around environmental values. And then you have professionals. So think your medical, legal, accounting. A great example is the medical professionals who follow the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. So, and then additionally, they typically focus on their social responsibility, anti-discrimination, or environmental sustainability, again, to align with the company's values. And then just to throw out a small disclaimer, a code of ethics is not something that's required for all companies, but it absolutely is highly recommended. So a big question, what is the difference between a code of ethics and a code of conduct? So a code of ethics is broader than a code of conduct, that gives us specific rules. This is about principles. So the ethics code asks, what's the right thing to do? The conduct code asks, what am I allowed to do? So think of it like this: code of ethics is the why, and the code of conduct is the how. Code of ethics can usually be Googled for many companies. That's public facing. It shows their commitment. The code of conduct is often internal. It's part of the employee handbook. So why does this matter? Because ethics directly impact a company's reputation. It impacts employee loyalty and even legal liability. So when companies don't prioritize ethics, the results can be devastating. Take 2016 Wells Fargo. They created millions of fake accounts just to hit their sales targets. In the end, that cost them $3 billion in fines and years of lost trust. It's a clear example of what happens when there's no real ethical culture in place, just rules on paper. So when it's done right, code of ethics helps avoid scandals, it encourages accountability, and it just promotes transparency across the board. Additionally, public companies often must have one, especially in a regulated industry. So how do you create an effective code? You want to start by identifying your company's core values. So what matters most to your company? And then you want to align those with laws and industry expectations. You want to involve employees, legal advisors, and absolutely your leadership. It's super important that it is written in plain language. This is not meant to confuse people. It's simple and easy to understand. Make sure that it includes your values, expected behaviors, compliance standards, and how to report issues. And then of course you want to train your staff and update it regularly. It's, like I said, it's really important to use easy, simple language. You want to also kind of throw in realistic, relatable scenarios like, what should I do if I see a coworker acting unethically? Obviously, the more specific and approachable, the better, but you get the idea. Codes that are written like legal contracts, they tend to get ignored and probably aren't acted on. So let's look at some real life examples. Google has a "Don't be evil" legacy, setting the tone for innovation and respect. In 2018, Google actually faced internal and public backlash after it was revealed that they were working with the US Department of Defense on Project Maven. This was a drone surveillance program that was using AI. So thousands of employees signed a petition and some even resigned. Ultimately, Google pulled out of the project, citing that it was a misalignment with their values. So the situation really tested Google's, "Don't be evil" motto, but the fact that employees' feedback and ethical concerns led to this major decision really shows like how the internal values can influence the leadership choices. It's a sign of a living code of ethics. Apple prioritizes privacy and proper tech use, so that is how they showed that. I'm sorry. Apple prioritizes privacy and proper tech use. And in 2018, the FBI actually asked Apple to unlock the iPhone of the San Bernardino shooter, and Apple refused. They were citing user privacy rights. They stood their ground. Tim Cook said, "We have a responsibility to help you protect your data and protect your privacy." So the core value being privacy and human rights, even under a lot of pressure, they didn't bend. They were protecting the integrity of their brand. They could have quietly complied with the FBI, but instead they made their values public and stood by them. So that's the company whose code of ethics actually guides their behavior. And then Johnson & Johnson's, our credo, emphasizes the responsibility to their patients, employees, and the environment. In 1982, Chicago saw 7 people die after taking Tylenol capsules that were laced with cyanide. Johnson & Johnson wasn't directly responsible. It was product tampering, but at the time, the public trust was shaken. So instead of them waiting around for somebody to do something, they actually immediately pulled over 31 million bottles of Tylenol from the shelves. They halted production, and then they offered full refunds. All in all, this cost them over $100 million, but this really showed their responsibility to their customers first, then employees, then shareholders, people over profit. So their response aligned with their value system. This crisis could have ended them, but because their response was so lined up with their ethics code, they gained the trust in the long run. So each of these companies faces a turning point where ethics could have been treated like a PR spin instead of followed. But Google backed out of a military contract, Apple held their stance, and Johnson & Johnson acted swiftly in a moment of danger, really. So whether you agree with all their actions or not, their responses suggest that a well-rooted code of ethics can and will guide your decision-making, even when millions of dollars or your reputation is at stake. So you really see a company's ethics in how they respond to crisis, not just in their statements, but ultimately in their actions. So how do companies live their code? Having the code of ethics on paper is important, but where it really matters is how it's lived day to day. And that starts with leadership. Leadership has to set the tone throughout their actions, not just their words. That means recognizing and rewarding ethical behavior, being fair and consistent with promotions and resources, and really showing appreciation and transparency. All of these things help build trust, and it's really crucial to a strong company culture. So recognition in particular really matters. If an employee speaks up about an ethical concern and they're ignored, or worse, punished, it really sends a clear message that ethics are just PR. They're not part of the real culture. And when we talk about transparency, we don't just mean annual reports or public statements. Transparency is how decisions are explained, how leadership communicates, how promotions are handled, and whether those open door policies are actually open. So it means just making sure your values show up in the small moments, not just the big ones. So most companies with strong codes have a lot of shared traits: integrity, accountability, legal compliance, fairness, inclusion, confidentiality. These aren't buzzwords, they are the pillars of ethical operations. So these traits shouldn't just exist in theory, they should show up in everything from hiring practices, even to vendor selection or your customer service policies. Have you ever worked in a company where ethics was clearly not a priority? It really changes and shifts the entire workplace dynamic, especially if you've worked somewhere where it is a big deal. So ultimately, the big takeaways, a code of ethics is your company's guiding light. It builds trust and it protects your culture, but it must be active. It's not just a document. Like you said, it lives in conversations, policies, and again, leadership behavior, because most importantly, it starts at the top. If your leadership doesn't live it, it's not gonna trickle down the same way. Whatever tone they set gets reflected throughout the organization. So to wrap up, remember that ethics don't slow you down. They protect you, they build you. Policies help, but the consistent action is what makes them real. So that's all I've got for you guys today. I'd like to open it up for any questions, thoughts, or just any examples that you've seen in real life that were interesting to you.
Thank you, Gabby. It doesn't look like we've had any questions. A couple of them I was able to answer on the side. The biggest one was obviously, is everyone going to receive a copy of the slide? And yes, everybody will receive a copy of this. I think we did have some information, Gabby, regarding HR service and some of the services that we provide. If you could share that slide, that'd be great.
Yep.
Yeah, just as a reminder, everyone, that HR service can be of assistance with the three main areas, including human resources and your benefit compliance for documents and notices, ACA 5500 reporting, and benefit administration for FSA, HRA, HSA, and COBRA. So it doesn't look like we have any additional questions right now. Does
Awesome.
anybody have any stories or thoughts as far as anything that they wanted to share? Otherwise, we'll let everyone get back to their day. We thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.